Oh, it is the extra point. Terry Ford hanging in. Tyler Head on the way. As we just kind of MacGyver this baby together for the rest of the day here on the game till hopefully when the weather breaks here in just a little bit. We will kick it. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Wes and Chris, hopefully they'll dig out of their neighborhoods. They'll be here at 11 as well. Hopefully this weather will be good because we got stuff to do later today. Par T Golf broadcasting live for the Long Drive Championship. So we'll see where it goes. But right now, we're hanging here on the extra point up until when Tyler can roll in here again. If you don't have to go anywhere, don't go anywhere. Obviously, the weather, I'll be a meteorologist. It sucks. So, exactly. So we are here, and we will keep going as long as we can keep going. As long as everything's rolling and we're on the air, we're gonna piece it together. All right. Obviously, no Gamecocks football Saturday as they are off this week. A week from tomorrow, Ole Miss rolls into town, but huge game in the SEC. Biggest game of the season so far in the SEC with Bama and Georgia. We'll talk about that and all the stuff going on in the SEC, the slate of games. There are some interesting ones. We got some ranked violence going on this weekend, also in college football as well. We had a game last night, Thursday Night Football. Once again, not the most appealing to the eye, but it's football, and you got to watch it. And it beats the heck out of, I don't know, watching no football. Because we watch it anyway, even though we complain about, it's really not that good, and it's really kind of boring, and, well, the Giants did nothing but kick field goals all night, and Dallas didn't really look great, but they're lucky the Giants aren't very good. We can talk about that, but we watch it, because that's what we do, and we'll watch next Thursday, and the Thursday after, and the Thursday after, no matter how bleh the product is. Because we love watching football. That's why Amazon's spending bazillions of dollars for Thursday night. And despite whatever matchups we get, we watch it. And really, look, I know why the Giants are on national television, because it's New York, media market number one. And there was a point in time the Giants were actually a good franchise, but they're not. And they haven't been for a long time. Yeah, they made the playoffs a couple years ago. Brian Dable, it was his first season. They made the playoffs, beat the Vikings in a playoff game. I get it, but now they're back to being what the Giants mostly are since they won their last Super Bowl. Was that 2011? But they slapped the Giants on TV because, again, it's New York. It's media market number one. And we are forced to watch a bad, boring football team play bad, boring football. And sad thing is, Daniel Jones wasn't that bad last night. And the Giant offense wasn't that bad last night. And they have Malik Neighbors, rookie wide receiver from LSU, who we watched here in the SEC, and he looks like the real deal. But still, the Giants are boring. And it wasn't very exciting, but we watch it anyway. And the Cowboys, you got a W. That's all that matters. You didn't look great doing it, but at least you didn't get run over like you have the last 2 weeks by opposing offenses. So that's what we got last night in the NFL. And we watch it, and we'll keep watching it because we do. But wow, that was just not very good football. You had a couple big plays in the game, but for the most part, especially the second half, a defensive snooze fest. A defensive / field goal kicking snooze fest with the Cowboys and the Giants. So we got that. Now we turn our attention again to the SEC, where Bama and Georgia will go at it. It's interesting. I saw the stat, and off the top of my head, I can't do it right now because I've been awake since God knows what time, and I'm loopy. But, I mean, the last time Kirby Smart lost to a football coach who is an active football coach right now, you ready for this? Tom Herman. You're like, who's that, Tara? Oh, yeah, that guy who coached Texas, right? Yeah. Isn't he, like, selling insurance now? No, he coaches, I think, Florida Atlantic. Tom Herman was the head coach at Texas, and it was a bowl game. It was a Cotton Bowl, but Georgia lost to Texas. That's where Sam Ehlinger was like, we're back. Remember the We're Back Bowl for Texas? Yeah, that's the last time Kirby Smart lost to someone not named Nick Saban. Run that one through your head. That's how good Georgia's been. And I'll say this, and I'll continue to say it, and I have no proof to back it because I don't. It's just what I think. if Georgia doesn't lose to Alabama, they win. They make it a three-peat. I don't think Michigan could have beat Georgia. I don't think anybody in that college football playoff Final Four could have beat Georgia. If it wasn't for Nick Saban, Kirby would have 3 in a row. Nick's gone. He's now hanging out on the set of College Game Day. We'll see what happens with this version of Alabama, Georgia. Kalen DeBoer, they love him. Oh, he's so media friendly. Oh, the players look so happy. They're smiling. They're playing music. They're chest bumping. They're having so much fun. Kalen DeBoer is such a breath of fresh air. We'll see. All I know is that guy that was no fun won you a lot of national championships. The guy that was no fun, even last year with a team that nowhere near the talent of his past teams, guess what? Was in the college football playoff. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That guy. That miserable, no fun geezer, all he did was lift your program, which was, let's be fair, was sitting in a coma, and brought you back to national prominence, even in a way the Bear Bryant never did. That's what that boring, no fun geezer did. So we'll see. I love Kalen DeBoer. I really do. I loved watching Washington last year. DeBoer was very successful at Fresno State, if my memory serves me. I mean, his coaching record in his career is vile how good it is. But he's no Nick Saban, at least not yet. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. We'll see. And maybe Alabama does beat Georgia because Alabama's got a ton of talent. Maybe Alabama does beat Georgia. And then we have other conversations about other things. But until Kalen DeBoer can walk off the field against Georgia with more points on the scoreboard than they've got while he is coaching Alabama, I'll just sit back and let's just see what happens. Because Georgia's good. I mean, yeah, Georgia had a whole lot of trouble in Lexington, Kentucky that nobody saw coming, especially after South Carolina went into Kroger Field and curb stomped the Wildcats. You're figuring, okay, Georgia will beat them by 100. Georgia beat them by 1. Their offense, it's been a long time since the Georgia offense looked like that. They were truly discombobulated. And typically Georgia on offense is an efficiency and success machine. They had some issues. Now, again, everybody has a bad day at the office. It happens. And this is truly a week-to-week game. And, yeah, you can look at what happened in the previous game, but then you look at the total body of work that is Georgia, and, yeah, they're replacing pieces. Absolutely. You're replacing an all-world tight end. You're replacing wide receivers. But your offensive line's good. It's really good. It's got a lot of returning pieces. And your quarterback is phenomenal. And you still have a lot of talent on the offensive side of the ball. Now, Alabama's defense is better than Kentucky's on paper. So we'll see how Georgia navigates against the Alabama D. But remember this, as good as Alabama can be with on both sides of the ball on paper, Tide, they struggled to beat South Florida. If you just looked at the score, you went, eh. But if you watch that game, South Florida for 3.5 quarters had Alabama in knots until the Tide scored, what was it, 15 touchdowns in the last, 7 or 8 minutes. So we'll see what happens Saturday. We will. And look, I'll say this, and I could be wrong because I usually am. I think Georgia wins. Alabama, Jalen Milroe, last year, Jalen Milroe was a lot of all or nothing as a quarterback throwing the football. He could throw it deep down the field. He could take off with his legs, but wasn't really efficient in the shorter intermediate areas throwing the rock. Well, this year, Alabama's offense is even more all or nothing. They're not super efficient. They just explode on you. Last time I checked, Georgia's pretty good on defense. So we'll see. I think Georgia wins. Again, could be wrong. Probably will be wrong. But until proven otherwise, Nick Saban's out of the way now. So Kirby, besides Nick, Kirby was pretty much road greating everybody at Georgia. I feel like that. I'm not going to say they blow out Alabama. I think they beat Alabama, though. I do. And this is to take nothing away from Kalen DeBoer. Because, again, I like Kalen DeBoer. And I got nothing against seeing Kalen DeBoer continue on with what's been happening at Alabama since Nick Saban took over. I just don't think you can do it. That's historic, iconic stuff. You just can't, we just put the next guy in that office and he'll just keep running. I don't think it's that easy. Kalen DeBoer could be very successful at Alabama, but not come close to the success Nick Saban had. Will that fan base understand that what Nick did was historic and truly once in a lifetime and, be able to be okay with a guy that's just doing really, really well? We'll see. So that's coming up this weekend. Huge game in the SEC. Gamecocks are off, obviously. They'll kick it back into gear, like I said, a week from tomorrow against Ole Miss. Quiet week, of course, with the off week. No Shane Beamer on Carolina calls. No Tuesday presser. We've talked a bit this week about where the Gamecocks are at this point in the season. 3-1, best start since 2017. So we'll take a look. The good, the bad, the pretty, and the ugly. 4 games in. We'll do that next here on the Extra Point. We're just piecing this baby together. Hope you're okay. Hope the storm didn't do anything to harm you or your loved ones or your family. Hopefully you have power, you have internet. Hopefully nothing got damaged at your home or anything around your home or your vehicles or anything. Hopefully everything's okay. If you don't have to go anywhere, don't go anywhere. It's ugly. I think the rain has stopped, but we still got some serious wind. So we'll come back, talk some Gamecocks. 3-1. What's good? What can get better? That's next here on the Extra Point. Terry Ford hanging in. Tyler's on the way in. We are rolling till noon on the game. It's a football Friday here on the Extra Point. Terry Ford hanging until Tyler gets here around 10. Trying to go business as usual this morning. Obviously, weather, it's getting better. There's your official forecast from your meteorologist, Terry Ford. It's getting better. Still windy. Rain has stopped here in downtown Columbia. But we still have some wind going. Now, the weather's supposed to really break later on as we get near the noon hour. And so far, we're still on Partsy Golf Long Drive Championship out in West Columbia on Charleston Highway. Shows will be there broadcasting live from noon to 6. Still on. So we'll be hanging out there having some fun with the halftime show and the postgame show. I'll be out there noon to 3. Elijah will be there 3 to 6. Jay is off today. Everything else, again, business as usual. That's our goal. So, all right, on a football Friday, South Carolina sitting in a bye week, 3-1. First time since 2017. There's good, a lot of good, especially on defense. I mean, the defense, the pass rush is one of the best in the nation. Freshman 5-star edge Dylan Stewart turning heads, especially in those first 2 games. Now, again, LSU, they got neutralized and also slowed down against Akron. Also, Akron, their passing game, they wanted to get the ball out quick. And they kind of rotated their offensive tackles, which had been an issue. But their goal was to get the ball out quick so their quarterback would not get killed. But Dylan Stewart probably, especially if you look at, the grades of the game, and if you watched it too, I mean, he really didn't have an impact. It was probably his worst game at South Carolina after 4 games. But Dylan Stewart has, wow. Stewart and Kyle Kennard coming off of both edges. South Carolina, again, one of the best pass rushes in the country. And in the interior, T.J. Sanders getting after quarterbacks. Tonka Hemingway. You also have that rotation with Boogie Huntley and DeAndre Jules. So the defensive front has been good. It really has. And the linebackers have better than we've seen the last couple years. Just more athleticism, more depth. They are making more plays that matter. They're not just making tackles 7 yards down the field. They're actually making more impactful plays closer to the line of scrimmage. Linebackers are better in coverage than we've seen recently. So with Debo, Demetrius Knight, Bam Martin Scott, Bengali Kamara, thrown in Fred Johnson a little bit, the youngin. Mo Kaba still working his way back from injuries, but the linebacking crew, a thumbs up compared to what we've seen the last 2 seasons. Secondary, O'Donnell Fortune's coverage has been fantastic. Nick Amenwari has stepped up his coverage game, and of course, it's easier to be better in coverage when your pass rush is chasing quarterbacks all over the place, trying to do harmful things to them. A better pass rush always helps your coverage. But O'Donnell Fortune, Nick Amenwari, thumbs up in coverage. Same thing with Jalen Kilgore, much better than last year. Part of that is those guys seemingly have gotten better, and 2, the pass rush is helping make them better. So defensively, yeah, I mean, you gave up 36 to LSU. And I always look at that as team points more than just defense. But the defense gave up some yards after the first quarter to LSU. LSU made some adjustments. Again, South Carolina went to that 3-man front. We can debate that all day. Was that a good move or not? The LSU game, yes, Tigers moved the ball. But that first quarter, what South Carolina did to the LSU offense, early in the second quarter, I think LSU had 7 total yards. So defense is legit. It's good. Really is. Offensively, is the offensive line better than it was last year? Yeah. But it had to be, right? Rashawn Lee has been solid. Torrelli Simpkins has been really good. The tackles, Casey Henry has had some rough go. Obviously, Josiah Thompson is a freshman, and we've seen him be a freshman at times. We've also seen him have some good moments, too, to be fair. Kamar Bell has been inconsistent. He's had some good moments and some not so good moments, but the offensive line as a whole, I think, is better than what we saw last year. Does it have to get better? Sure it does. But I think it is better than what was rolled out there last year because of all the injuries and the issues last year on the O-line. Obviously, running back is better. No offense to anyone who was there last year. But having Rocket Sanders, and you saw Sanders against LSU. Now, Sanders hurt his ankle against Akron. Smart move. Hey, man, sit down. Sit down. We're going to play all the other running backs. You're good. You're good. We'll see you against Ole Miss. But Rocket Sanders has been an upgrade. We saw some Oscar Attaway against Akron and some of the other young backs. So the running back room is in a better place than it was last year, which we knew that coming into the season. We're not surprised. Wide receiver group is still a work in progress. You got to be happy with what you saw from Gage Larvadain and Mazio Bennett last Saturday. Again, it's Akron. Let's remember, it's Akron. I get it. But they made plays. Larvadain down the field. First time he got to really play this year, to be fair. Bennett, 5 catches on 5 targets. He's had some really nice moments as a freshman. No Jared Brown last Saturday, again, sitting him out, getting him ready for Ole Miss. But with those 3 guys, you hope you got something to build upon. That's the goal there. You're building upon what you have with Jared Brown, Gage Larvadain, and also Mazio Bennett. Then you're like to see Nick Harbor. He had a couple grabs against Akron. Hopefully Nick Harbor can continue to get better. That would be nice as well. So we'll see. But the wide receivers, there are moments there where you go, ooh. And we can't forget about Dre Jacobs, who made some plays in the first couple games. Really hasn't done a whole lot in the last 2. But Jacobs, has a lot of ability as well. Tight ends, we saw some good things from Josh Simon and Michael Smith. The offense, again, does it have to get better? Absolutely. Have we seen some things that can make us hopeful? Sure. And we obviously end on the quarterback. Lenora Sellers, after that rough go against Old Dominion, has shown the ability to get better in every game. Was hurt, did not play, obviously, against Akron, and he's been hurt twice now this year. Got hurt in the Kentucky game, obviously. So are you starting to get concerned about injury being an issue with Sellers? I mean, that's human nature. You got to be a little concerned about it, right? Robbie Ashford got thrown into the fire against LSU. Again, it was a mixed bag. Running Lenora Sellers' game plan, but thumbs up to Dow and the offensive staff for putting together a game plan for Robbie Ashford against Akron. Again, I know it's Akron, but Robbie Ashford had a hell of a game against Akron. Running it, throwing it. Robbie Ashford, he had one of the best days of any quarterback in the country. We'll see if that needs to continue on at some point in the year if Lenora Sellers can't stay healthy. There have been some folks, a few, not a lot, who have been saying, play Robbie Ashford. Look what Ashford did against Akron. It's better than Sellers has done all year. Well, again, it was Akron. Lenora Sellers is the starting quarterback. I don't think there's a quarterback controversy except for a few folks who watched Ashford against Akron and said, that's the deal right there. But again, it was Akron. It's not Ole Miss. It's not LSU. It's not Kentucky. I feel like the offense, we're seeing it get better in all phases. It still has to grow, has to get to another level or two to win some games. I mean, Ole Miss, even if the South Carolina defense plays really well, your feeling is you got to score some points to beat Ole Miss. You just do. Because that's a high-octane crew. Same thing with Alabama. We talked about in the opening riff of the show, Alabama isn't the most efficient bunch in the world on offense, but explosive plays all over the place. So it feels like you're going to have to score points as a team to beat those two. It's not just the offense, as a team. Like in the LSU game, you saw contributions from all phases to be able to get your 33. That's right now, that's the feeling as you play Ole Miss and Alabama coming up. You're going to have to score points in those games. Some games you can, have a rock fight, but those are games it feels like you're really going to have to bring it and produce some points in the 30s, most likely. Tyler Head's on the way. It's the Extra Point. Terry Ford. Again, if you're just jumping in, hopefully you're okay. Everything's fine. You're fine. Your family's fine. Your friends and loved ones are fine. Hopefully your house is fine. Your property's fine and all that good stuff. Hopefully you have electricity and internet and all those things. Hopefully everything's okay for you. It was a tough night, especially early this morning. Our early game, our folks stayed home, safety of their places. We got it cooking off of Infinity Sports Radio at 9 a.m. We're good now. We're rolling. Knock on wood. And we'll continue to roll. Tyler will be here about 10 to take it from me. Hoping we'll get our Gamecock Central guys in, Chris and Wes. Again, this is a very fluid day. Our goal is to be broadcasting live from Par T Golf from noon to 6 with the halftime show and the postgame show. Again, it's a fluid day. We'll just be as honest as we can with you what's going on, and we're going to keep trying to do some local radio from 9 a.m. on, as it seems like the weather, we're hoping the worst is past us here in Columbia in the Midlands. We shall see. All right. Come back. Like we said, a lot of games in the world of college football. Some ranked on ranked violence this weekend. We're going to get into that next. It's the Extra Point. Terry Ford hanging till Tyler gets here at 10 here on the game. All right, again, just give you a little update looking at our situation here on the game. Weather-wise, first of all, the rain feels like that's pretty much behind us for the most part, the heavy rain. Wind, we're still getting some wind around 20 miles an hour. The sun is supposed to peak out sometime late morning, early afternoon. So we're hoping, again, the worst is behind us. That's the hope and the goal, that the worst is hopefully behind us. And we can start moving forward. Word is Greenville had some issues. Weather Channel will give you updates on that as well. But we're hanging in there, and we should be able to continue on, hopefully getting ourselves back to full function right here on the game with the Extra Point. All right, extra point. Terry Ford, glad you're going to be hanging. I guess who laid the wood last night? I guess the Dallas Cowboys. They won. Wasn't pretty. Wasn't dominant. Yeah, Dallas just beat a bad football team. Held the Giants to nothing but field goals. So I guess, hey, way to go, Cowboys. You laid the wood. You got to win. Good for you. You needed one because you've been a mess the last couple of weeks. So we'll just give the Cowboys their props. Dak Prescott was efficient, especially on first down and especially in the first half. CeeDee Lamb quit whining and crying on the sidelines, went out and played football, made some plays. Dallas defense kept the Giants out of the end zone, and they laid the wood, I guess, to New York last night. Giants fall to 1-3. Micah Parsons was hurt. I guess his ankle. There should be an MRI today. DeMarcus Lawrence also was hurt. Another very important cog to the Dallas defense, but they think Lawrence will be okay when Dallas plays again in 10 days. That's good news. If Parsons is beat up or banged up, you got 10 days to get him back on the field. All right, so like I said, we're going to take a spin here around the top 25. We talked about Alabama, Georgia in the opening riff of the show, the big game in the country in college football. And we discussed, everybody's loving Kalen DeBoer. He's such a breath of fresh air compared to old crotchety Nick. Yeah. Crotchety Nick just won national championships. Now, DeBoer's played for one, but right now he's won as many as you and I. So we'll see what happens on Saturday, tomorrow, between Bama and Georgia. One thing with Georgia, I guess if you're going to have a after, almost the entire month of September, it's what's happened to the downfield passing game with Carson Beck. I know that there's some weapons are gone. I know Brock Bowers and others. Wide receiver, Ladd McConkey, not there, a second-round pick in the NFL draft. Bowers was a first-round pick. You've lost some talent at wide out, but you have talent at wide receiver. Your offensive line's got a lot of dudes that will get paychecks. There should be no reason why your downfield passing game is struggling the way it is. Georgia's got to get that fixed. Especially if Alabama starts hitting big plays, which I don't think they're going to hit a lot of big plays because the Georgia defense is vile for how good they are. But Georgia's going to have to get some stuff going down the field in this game. But if you continue to look on what's going on around the top 25 in college football, this is a lot of interesting stuff. Louisville is in South Bend to take on Notre Dame. Cardinals are number 15 in the country, Notre Dame number 16. Really, Notre Dame's got to win the game. Because remember, they're not in a conference. Because they don't want to be in one, and that's fine. But your margin of error is a little different. You got beat by Northern Illinois, which really hurt you. Especially watching Northern Illinois lose to the Fighting Limbos last Saturday. You don't have a lot of wow games on your schedule that will impress a committee. You really can't lose another one. This is one of those games that can impress a committee right now. I don't know what Louisville is going to be moving forward. They've been a very efficient football team on both sides of the ball so far. But I don't know where they're going to be at the end of the year, so you have to win this game. If you're Notre Dame, you have to win. You don't have a lot more chances to make the committee go, Notre Dame belongs in the tournament. Louisville's got some tougher road to hoe down the line where even if they lose to Notre Dame, which would be Louisville's first loss of the year, if they can handle their business moving forward for the most part, they can still be getting an eyeball, and they can win the ACC and be the automatic qualifier. And the way the ACC is right now, Louisville's got a shot. I mean, Miami looks like the best of the bunch today, but we'll see. Who knows? But that's an interesting game in South Bend between Louisville and Notre Dame. That's an afternoon tilt. Other ranked action, there's a few. A Big Ten game. Now, this on paper doesn't look very thrilling, but number 9 Penn State is hosting number 19 Illinois. Penn State on paper should win this game by a couple of scores. Penn State is favored by almost 20. And typically Penn State's only had trouble in the Big Ten against the top dogs. Penn State's pretty good at beating up the skinny, dorky kids for their lunch money. Not really good when they go up against the other big dogs in the James Franklin era. Illinois is not a big dog, but that was pretty impressive going into Lincoln and beating Nebraska. Illinois is 4-0. And Brent Bielema, and I said this the other day, I don't know what it is about Brent Bielema that I'm not a big fan. Maybe because Bielema was so bad at Arkansas, you forget about how good Bielema was at Wisconsin. It feels like the Big Ten is Brent Bielema's wheelhouse. You know, lower scoring games, big uglies fighting it in the trenches, a lot of bad weather, a lot of dried snot on people's faces. That must be Brent Bielema's comfort level, because we know the SEC wasn't. I think Penn State wins. I think it will be a multiple score game, but could Illinois hang around for a while? Yeah, I just don't know if they're going to score enough, because Penn State's been pretty explosive this year on offense. Again, they're not beating anybody, and they played Bowling Green way too close. But Penn State at home, if they stay aggressive on offense, I don't think Illinois can score enough to beat Penn State. Because Illinois' defense slow down the Nittany Lions, sure. I just don't think Illinois can score enough. Because that's been the problem when Illinois loses games. But we'll see a little bit about the Penn State offense today. Just, with the new offensive coordinator again, what you got. We'll find out. But that is another ranked on ranked battle. That one is in the Big Ten. So that's a couple of the interesting ones between ranked teams. I'm trying to scroll to see if I missed one. I don't think I did. Oh, yeah, I did miss one. There it is. Number 20, Oklahoma State, rolling into Manhattan, Kansas, against number 23, Kansas State. Oklahoma State, they got beat up pretty good by Utah in Stillwater. And Oklahoma State really should have a second loss. Arkansas just said, wow, we're winning this game by a lot. In Stillwater, Oklahoma State, here, we're gonna wrap it up and gift it back to you. So Oklahoma State could be 2-2, but they are 3-1. They go to Manhattan, Kansas. Kansas State coming off, they got whooped by BYU in Provo. I mean, absolutely whooped. I was watching that game. I was stunned. I was absolutely stunned. Not that BYU won, but just in the manner of where they just stood there and slapped Kansas State. So now Kansas State back home, Oklahoma State coming in. This kind of, again, it's the fifth game of the year for both squads. But this is one of those, it's in your best interest to win. Because Kansas State's coming off a bad loss. Oklahoma State's coming off a loss as well. And both these teams, they got physically whooped. So somebody's going to feel a lot better walking off that field tomorrow with a W. I think Kansas State wins at home, but this is kind of goofy game Oklahoma State could win. Whenever you count out the Fighting Gundies surprise you and win a game, you go, I didn't think they'd win that one. And then after that, they lose to some elementary school. That's what Oklahoma State does. So that's some of the ranked on ranked stuff coming up this weekend. We'll spin through the SEC coming up next. It is the Extra Point. Terry Ford, glad you could be hanging. Hey, this tomorrow's Saturday, right? I have no idea what day it is right now. I've been awake so long. I got no idea what day it is. Tomorrow, I think, is Saturday. Sips and Sounds, unlimited sampling over 40 brands of local and national craft beers, wines, seltzers, and spirits. Live performances by Ken and Drew from Sister Hazel. Also, you got Dazer, the Donovan Twins. It is tomorrow. There's no Gamecock football game, so check out Sips and Sounds. $30 gets you all this cool stuff. If you want to go into the VIP deal there with Halls, that's $50. But you can go to sipsandsoundscola.com to get all the information you need. Sipsandsounds.com cola. Go jump in there and check it out. Might be something to do tomorrow again. Hey, there's no Gamecock football. So maybe you can get out and have a little fun at Sips and Sounds. Come back, take a spin through the SEC next. It is the Extra Point with Terry Ford. Hey, Tyler Head actually made it. He survived. Good to see you, bud. You have no idea how good it is to see you, bud. We'll come back, wrap up our hour, then hand off to Tyler at 10 here on the Extra Point on the Game. Extra Point. Terry Ford hanging in with you for another segment. Then Tyler will jump in. Take it from here. Hope Wes and Chris can get in for Gamecock Central Takeover Hour at 11. We'll see. We hope. And so far, it's still on. We'll be at Par T Golf for the Long Drive Championships from noon to 6 in West Columbia. So we have that going on today. It's all fluid today. We're hanging in there. We're hoping that's what's going to happen. Love Chevy High School football scoreboard show tonight. That's going on with Elijah and Justin. Shorter version because of the weather issues. Some teams played earlier in the week. So the schedule's been, again, we'll use that word, fluid. And so Justin and Elijah will get you caught up on everything that's going on this week. The Love Chevy High School football scoreboard show along with our buddy Ed Bird. Again, that's 7 to 9 tonight here on the Game. All right, SEC for Saturday. We talked about Bama and Georgia. It is an interesting Saturday. Ole Miss will actually play a real team, we think. Which Kentucky shows up at the Grove? Will it be the Kentucky that got boat raced by South Carolina? Or will it be the Kentucky that scared the heck out of Georgia? I don't know. Kentucky's on the road. Both those games were in Lexington. Kentucky's on the road at Ole Miss. Ole Miss has played no one so far this year, and they have beat the bleep out of all of them. So we'll get a little taste of what Ole Miss could be or couldn't be. I don't know how much of a gauge. It depends on which Kentucky team shows up. But Ole Miss playing at home against Kentucky, that is a noon start tomorrow. I don't know how much we're going to get about some others. The other interesting game, though, will be Texas A&M at 3-1, hosting Arkansas in College Station. Arkansas should be 4-0, man. Uncle Sam should be undefeated if you don't blow the game against Oklahoma State in Stillwater. A&M looked terrible against Notre Dame at home to start the season in that loss, but since then, won 3 straight. There's quarterback stuff going on at A&M with the injury to Wegman, so we'll see where they go. But A&M hosting Arkansas, 2 3-1 teams going at it in College Station. It would be interesting if Uncle Sam could win that game. Arkansas sitting at 4-1 and 2 games away from being bowl eligible. Because I think if Uncle Sam is bowl eligible, he's back. That would be my guess. So we'll see what happens there. Number 21, Oklahoma. Here's a game of 2 wounded teams. Oklahoma's 3-1, but doesn't feel like 3-1 because Oklahoma was humbled at home by Tennessee. Auburn's 2-2. They haven't looked good at being 2-2. Their quarterbacks keep throwing the ball to the other team. Their skill position guys like to fumble it to the other team. Besides that, they're moving the football up and down the field. Auburn's 2-2, and the coach has spent more time throwing everybody under the bus, especially his quarterbacks, and then he'll go, oh, yeah, I got to coach better too. So this one will be interesting because somebody will feel better about themselves moving forward, and the other one won't feel really great because if Auburn loses, you fall to 2-3. Oklahoma at least would be able to stumble themselves out of the plains at 4-1, and they're starting a backup quarterback because they benched Jackson Arnold. You know, the guy they couldn't wait to put in as a starter. This game is, there's a lot of drama, both in Auburn and in Norman, Oklahoma. Game is on the plains. We'll see where it goes. Auburn loses, you're 2-3. We'll see what Hugh Freeze says. And look, I think Hugh Freeze will win at Auburn. I don't know how big, to what level, but Hugh Freeze is a good football coach. But they're crazy on the plains. And if Hugh Freeze falls at 2-3, and let's say Oklahoma beats them in a pretty sound manner, what's going to go on there? Are all the cooks that like to be in the kitchen in Auburn going to start screaming and yelling and running with their spatulas toward the football program offices? I don't know. And what if Oklahoma loses and they still have problems at quarterback? And you're 3-2. And you're winless in the SEC. We'll see. It's going to be a fun little Saturday at Auburn, I guess what we should say. Also, I mean, again, the other games in the SEC, we're not talking about heavyweight slate, but still, the rest of it looks like this. You'll also have Mississippi State going to Texas. That will be ugly. Texas is only favored by 37.5. They could be favored by 137.5, to be quite honest. Mississippi State lost their starting quarterback, Blake Shapen, and they weren't very good before they lost their starting quarterback. And LSU hosts South Alabama. Isn't South Alabama the team that beat Appalachian State by about 100? So LSU should win at home. It's a night game in Baton Rouge. But South Alabama, I mean, LSU is a 20-point favorite. So that's what's going on in the SEC. All right, we're going to hand this off to Tyler Head here in just a couple seconds. He will take over with the extra point. I will go to sleep. That's the plan. We'll see if it works. We'll come back in here, halftime show Again, we are scheduled to be at Par T Golf in West Columbia for the Long Drive Championship with the post-game show and the halftime show. Still on, as we know, and we'll let you know and give you some more information. But Tyler's going to take this baby from here for the extra point. Hoping the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, we can get Wes and Chris in here as well. And again, hope you're safe. If you don't have to go anywhere, don't. It's windy. Extra point, Tyler, coming up next here on the game.
10 o'clock on your Friday morning. Welcome back in to the Extra Point. Tyler Head now along with you here on this Football Friday. Appreciate Terry Ford holding down the fort for the first hour there. As he said, things are very, very fluid today. If you're like me, you probably woke up with no power this morning and some pretty howling winds going on around wherever you live. So hopefully everybody out there is safe. Hopefully you've checked on everybody that you know and love, especially throughout the Southeast. As this storm has been pretty nasty from everything I've seen and heard so far. I got a buddy down in Tallahassee that I've been checking in with this morning that has gotten hit pretty hard. So certainly want to extend thoughts and prayers to everyone out there, and hopefully the worst is past. It certainly seems like it has here, and everything can get back to normal as the day goes along. But we are here today. It's Football Friday. No Gamecock football, of course, but plenty of action this weekend to get you set for across the college and professional football landscape. I was not here an hour ago for 9 o'clock, but we're moving things around a little bit. So instead, we'll have a little 10 o'clock Sandstorm pick-me-up. Yes, as always, it is time for your 9 a.m./10 a.m. Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up, brought to you by South Carolina's largest injury law firm, George Sink Injury Lawyers. If you've been hurt in the car or at work, call George Sink now at 803 all nines. Of course, not going to be hearing much Sandstorm this weekend with South Carolina being idle. A chance for them to get to relax, get healthy. Obviously, the team last practiced on Wednesday, getting to enjoy a long weekend, and they'll be back in come Monday to start focusing in on their next game, which is Ole Miss, coming up next Saturday at 3:30 at Williams-Brice Stadium. And the advantage of this bye week coming when it does for South Carolina is you get the opportunity to sit back tomorrow and watch your next opponent in action. And not just in action, but in action against the first quality opponent or close to quality opponent that Ole Miss has seen on their schedule so far this season. The best team they played up to this point has been Wake Forest, which that game was a rout and didn't really tell us a whole lot about what this Ole Miss team is this year. Because if you sit here and think about it, what do we really know? If I told you to lay out what we really know about Ole Miss as of right now, you'd say they're really talented and they've gone out there and beaten lesser opponents in the exact way you thought they were going to. It's been a cake schedule. They've got the biggest point differential in the SEC so far in this young season. So tomorrow, hopefully, we'll give you the opportunity to gauge some things from a SEC standpoint with Ole Miss before they come in here to Williams-Brice Stadium. So the question is, what are going to be the important things to look out for in this matchup tomorrow to really gauge, again, where this Ole Miss team is and where South Carolina might be able to have the advantages? A couple things that I'm looking at. One, how good is Ole Miss's pass rush? Phil Steele, in his preseason magazine, ranks the top 68 offensive lines in college football. Ole Miss has yet to face any one of those top 68 offensive lines. Again, Georgia Southern, Furman FCS team, Wake Forest, teams like that, not quality opponents by any means. They have 13 sacks so far, which is right behind South Carolina at the top of the SEC. In fact, only one behind South Carolina, who has 14 as of right now. Can they get the same results that Carolina did against Kentucky? Because remember, in that Kentucky game, Kennard and Stewart lived in the backfield for those 4 quarters. And that, in our mind, established South Carolina's pass rush as very legit after what we'd seen in week number 1 against Old Dominion. They obviously followed that up by doing similar numbers or having a similar effect on Garrett Nussmeier in the LSU game the next week. So can Ole Miss have those same kind of results against Kentucky's offensive line? They've got a very deep room when it comes to their pass rushers. Jared Ivey's returning. They got Princely Yu coming over from Florida. They got a transfer in Chris Hardy, who had 8.5 sacks last year at Jacksonville State. And they have a true freshman in Cam Franklin, who is a 4-star edge coming out of high school, that is also making an impact as well. So that's one area that I'm really keen on keeping an eye on tomorrow in this matchup with Ole Miss and Kentucky. Also, how accurate is Jackson Dart going to be? Jackson Dart is thought of as one of the best returning quarterbacks, not only in the SEC, but in the country this year. Guy's been around the game of college football for very, very long. And he currently leads the SEC in total yards, completion percentage, and overall quarterback rating. He's had a fantastic start to the season, again, against not the best lay of opponents. But last year against the SEC, he was only completing about 63% of his passes. And he only threw 5 interceptions on the season. 4 of those, 1 in each, came against SEC opponents. So his production does dip a little bit and quite significantly against those better opponents when he plays against conference teams. Sellers was the best quarterback. Sellers has had the best performance of a Kentucky defense so far this season, with his 166 yards and 71.4 completion percentage. And Carson Beck the other weekend didn't have the best showing against him. Nobody's gone out there and annihilated them for 250 or 300 yards quite yet. Can Jackson Dart do that? Similarly, will Jackson Dart be pressured? We think of Ole Miss's offensive line as one of the best in not just the SEC, but in all of college football. He's only been pressured on 18% of his dropbacks so far this season. Just 18%. That's how good of a job they've done against protecting him so far. When he is pressured, though, he's only completing a little over 50% of his passes. So can that pass rush of Kentucky have any kind of effect on Jackson Dart tomorrow? And that could give you an indication okay, if he's struggling against Kentucky's pass rush, he can really struggle against what South Carolina is going to bring to the table coming up next weekend. Also, how many explosive plays can Ole Miss hit tomorrow? They are second in the nation in explosive plays per game, in explosive pass plays per game this year. Trey Harris, their leading receiver, is averaging over 150 yards per game. Very good deep ball threat. And Juice Wells, I know, we're treating him like Lord Voldemort from the Harry Potter books, where we're not supposed to say his name, but he is a big key factor in this offense. He's averaging almost 20 yards per reception so far this year. They are a very dynamic passing team. But again, nobody has had a lot of success throwing the ball so far against Kentucky's defense. Can Jackson Dart, these receivers, and this Ole Miss offense be the first ones to do it coming up tomorrow? As well, can they get off to a fast start? Ole Miss has put up at least 17 points in the first quarter of every single game they've played so far this season. Would they be able to win a grinded-out, low-scoring affair? Because that's Kentucky's MO, right? Mark Stoops is a defensive-minded head coach. He's not there to win a 49-48 shootout. He wants to drag you into the mud. He wants to limit your possessions. He wants to get takeaways. He wants to muck the game up and win in the trenches. Is he the most successful coach at doing that? No. But look at what happened to Georgia the other weekend when Kentucky's defense was playing as best as we've seen them play in a long time. They kept Georgia from being explosive. They kept Georgia from being dynamic, and they drugged them into the mud for 4 quarters. And if Mark Stoops doesn't go ultra conservative with, 3 minutes to go when he decides to punt the ball from midfield, Kentucky might win that game. That's the style of football Kentucky likes to play. Ole Miss, not so much. Not saying that they can't, because they're a very talented and skilled defense, but their game is scoring a lot of points. They're an offensive-minded team. Lane Kiffin is obviously an offensive guru that is calling the plays there. They want to boat race you 52-10. How do they handle a low-scoring, grinded-out type of affair? Because when you think about South Carolina and these next couple of games coming up, specifically against Ole Miss and Alabama, if Carolina wins those games, and look, they're not going to be favored. Nobody's going to pick them, but I'm just saying if Carolina is going to win those games, it's likely because they're low-scoring defensive affairs. I don't think South Carolina's offense as of right now is high-flying and dynamic enough to go out there and win a track meet. Now, I said that similarly about the LSU game the other week, and they did manage to put up 33 points, so, can't be proven wrong there. But you're going up against much better defenses in Ole Miss and Alabama than you had against LSU. I don't think South Carolina's winning a 45-42 game against either one of those teams. They're going to have to rely on the defense. They're going to have to rely on the pass rush. They're going to have to rely on getting takeaways and, like Kentucky wants to do tomorrow, drag Ole Miss down into the mud and turn it into a four-quarter slugfest if they're going to win those games. So tomorrow is our first opportunity to really understand fully who Ole Miss is. And look, I have a lot of confidence Ole Miss is going to win this game. I'm not putting any chips on Kentucky, but Kentucky could make it a very physical game, right? And that's something that could play into South Carolina's advantage, because if Ole Miss goes out there and for the first time this year really gets tested in a physical four-quarter grinded out type of game where they're not able to, sit their starters halfway through the third quarter, then what kind of shape are they going to be in coming into Columbia next weekend? Because again, Carolina's sitting at home. They got their feet kicked up. They're getting healthy. They're feeling good, feeling refreshed, gonna be ready to go next weekend. If Ole Miss plays a very physical game, they might not come in here at 100%. That could play to South Carolina's advantage. I don't necessarily know if you need to root for Kentucky to win this game, because I don't know if I'd want to play an Ole Miss team that's coming in here angry after losing, but you can at least maybe hope that Kentucky makes it interesting and Kentucky test Ole Miss like they haven't been tested before, to maybe have them a little bit more on their heels than they've been so far this season, because it's been a cakewalk up to this point for the very easy schedule that they've played so far this season. That game will be kicking off at noon, so you can start off your day getting the scouting report on Ole Miss. And then tomorrow night, the biggest game, College Game Day, is going to be there. All eyes of the nation going to be on Tuscaloosa, Alabama, as number 2 Georgia takes on number 4 Alabama, who Carolina's playing in a couple weeks. So you get the scouting report of Ole Miss and Alabama if you hadn't seen them play so far. The magnitude of this game tomorrow night cannot be understated. 2 heavyweights, 2 elite programs playing each other for early SEC supremacy as of right now. It's not the end-all be-all, but it's a way for one of these teams to establish themselves as the top dog, the team to beat through the first month of the season in the SEC. We'll dive into that matchup, what to look out for, and who might end up on top when it's all said and done. Coming up next. It is Football Friday. Again, the halftime show and postgame show going to be broadcasting from the Ultimate Long Drive World Championship at Partee at 3209 Charleston Highway in West Columbia. Terry's going to be out there. Elijah's going to be out there. That's getting set to be started here in a little under 2 hours, so certainly looking forward to all that. We'll dive into Alabama and Georgia coming up next on your Football Friday. Tyler Head along with you on the Extra Point here on The Game. Tyler Head here, always excited to tell you about our friends over at Twin Peaks. Do you consider yourself a bourbon connoisseur? Well, at Twin Peaks, they are proud to offer an exclusive and extensive collection of some incredibly rare bourbons, whiskeys, and tequilas. Plus, you can check out barrel selects that are handpicked by their team and bottled just for you. The supply is limited. Check in with the location down here in the Vista to see what they're pouring. You can also get your axe to the lodge for the freshest menu additions. Spice up your wing order with new sauces featuring chicken tikka or spicy chili crisp, or try a new take on their famous flatbreads with backyard barbecue brisket or chicken tikka as well. If you can't decide between quesadilla and tacos, grab the quesabirria tacos featuring in-house smoked brisket and served with bria broth for dipping. All this, bourbons, new food, TVs as far as the eye can see, and of course those 29-degree draft beers, all with our friends at Twin Peaks down in the Vista.
Less now. I mean, it's just you move on. I think last time we went, it was 4 or 5 years from the time we had lived there, and it's so weird when you play there because you're in and out. You're there and then you're gone. So it's just different. But you really focus on the players, what they have to do, what we have to do to execute, that it takes away from that thing. There's a lot of people that are still there in the organization that I'm close with and have a lot of respect for, but that's the case in a lot of these places in the SEC.
Welcome back into the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Football Friday here on the game. That, of course, was the voice of Georgia football head coach Kirby Smart talking about, if it's odd going back to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where he spent so long under Nick Saban as an assistant, but has now been at Georgia for almost 10 years, which is crazy to think about. But made a couple of trips there in the time since then. But, as you would expect him to say, kind of like a business trip, you get in, you get out, and you move on to the next thing. So I don't think there's too many emotions hung up in this game for Kirby Smart. Huge matchup. Obviously, as I said, the biggest one in college football so far this season could end up being the biggest one of the entire year, depending on how things go over the course of the next couple of months. My biggest question going in, and I think the question of many people, is what version of each team are we getting? Because we've seen both Georgia and Alabama dominate quality opponents. Georgia manhandled Clemson in their season opener in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and then 2 weeks ago, Alabama went on the road to Camp Randall and mauled Wisconsin for 4 quarters. Yes, I know Tyler Van Dyke got hurt early in that game. I don't think that would have made that much of a difference. Alabama walked out of there with a pretty easy victory. But at the same time, we've seen them both struggle against teams that were heavy underdogs. Georgia, 2 weeks ago, went up to Lexington, Kentucky, barely escaped by the skin of their teeth with a 1-point win, and their offense looking very discombobulated. And while the final score doesn't indicate it, if you watch the game, you know that Alabama struggled with South Florida for basically 50 minutes before tacking on a couple touchdowns at the end to make it look a lot better. So these teams have had their ups and downs early on in the season. Now, I expect both teams to bring their A game because that's what elite teams do. It's not uncommon to have seen a Georgia or a Nick Saban Alabama team struggle with the team that they're not supposed to struggle with, and then 2 weeks later go out there and manhandle a ranked team. Like, that's just what they do. So I expect both teams to play their best football coming up tomorrow. A lot of things to watch for in this game, and if you are looking for a fun drinking game while you're taking this game in, take a drink or a shot, whatever you prefer, every time Ryan Williams' name is mentioned. For those that are not familiar, Ryan Williams is Alabama's leading receiver. He is 17 years old. This is something that they like to bring up quite a bit on the broadcast because it really just shows how amazing what he's doing is. The fact that he still should technically be like a high school kid based on his age. But he's going out there, he's playing great football, and you're probably going to hear his age get brought up a couple different times tomorrow. So keep those drinks handy as the game is going on. Dude's a superstar. Despite his size, right at about 6 foot, he is mainly a guy they like to play out wide. We'll play a little bit of slot, but mainly an out wide guy, and is a big deep ball threat. Has hauled in 4 touchdowns this season, 3 of those on throws of 20 or more yards. Now, on the other side of the equation, Georgia has not allowed any touchdowns this year. They've allowed only field goals, 1 each to Clemson and Tennessee Tech, and then the 4 field goals to Kentucky the other week. So nobody has crossed over into the end zone playing Georgia's defense this year. Alabama's got a very good chance to do that. I'm interested to see this matchup between Ryan Williams and Georgia's secondary. I imagine that Georgia's going to put Julian Humphrey, who's their best cover corner, on Ryan Williams for this game. But it's not just him, because we're talking about deep ball threats. You're talking about safeties getting involved and being that last line of defense to prevent a guy like Ryan Williams from getting into the end zone. Georgia has very good cover safeties. KJ Bolden, Malachi Starks, and Dan Jackson, all guys very capable of dropping into coverage and making plays. Malachi Starks had that phenomenal interception against Clemson in their Week 1 game. So this it's going to be kind of the unstoppable force meets immovable object type of matchup between these two teams when it comes to in the air. But I think the biggest key is the ground game. Let's go back 2 weeks ago. Kentucky ran for $170 against Georgia's defense. What is lauded as one of the best defenses in all the country. They ran all over them. Bama has a three-headed monster when you talk about Milroe and his running ability, Jam Miller and Justice Haynes as that kind of thunder and lightning at running back. These guys can run. Can Georgia stop it? We'll see. Because if Alabama gets the ground game going, they're going to be really hard to slow down. Because you can take away Ryan Williams, but they can run it down your throat. Believe me, Alabama will do that. On the other side of things, Georgia's run game, keep in mind, they're going to be without their best offensive lineman, or one of their best offensive linemen, and Tate Ratledge at guard, who went out the other week against Kentucky, didn't finish that game, had the tightrope surgery, and is going to be out for a while. He's the best run blocker they have on that offensive line. Georgia's run game, it's been okay. They've been decimated by injuries. Trevor Etienne finally came back against Tennessee Tech a couple weeks ago. Hasn't had that wow superstar performance that I think everybody's kind of been waiting on from him so far. So can Georgia get their ground game going? And can Carson Beck be elite? Let's think back. And yes, this is no longer a Nick Saban coach team, but Alabama has not lost a lot of home games in the past 15 years. Let's just think back to the last two times they lost at home. Last season versus Texas and 2019 versus LSU. The quarterbacks of those teams, Quinn Ewers and Joe Burrow. Two pretty darn good quarterbacks. Joe Burrow obviously went on to win the Heisman, be the number one overall pick. Quinn Ewers, he's injured right now, but could very well fall into that same category. You have to come in and play your best version of quarterback against Alabama. Carson Beck wasn't his best version of quarterback against Kentucky. Missed some throws. Wide receivers did make some drops. The reads weren't as good. He just looked like he struggled. The past 2 weeks since, he better have gotten it together because Alabama's going to test you. And ultimately, can Kirby get over the Bama hump? He is 1-5 since taking over as the Georgia head coach against Alabama. Now, yes, those were all matchups against Nick Saban. He got him in the one national championship game, but there was something about Alabama as Kirby Smart is the head coach of Georgia that has just been his Achilles heel. Does that change with Kalen DeBoer? We'll see. Because if Kalen DeBoer beats Georgia his first time out, the questions in Athens become, well, can Kirby ever consistently beat Alabama? I don't know. And on the flip side of things, if Georgia comes in there and wins this game, maybe by a couple touchdowns, the question is Alabama falling that far down? There's a lot that rides on this game for Kalen DeBoer's reputation in Alabama because everybody feels good right now. They've been winning. And he does things differently. Players are having fun. He's wearing hoodies on the sidelines. That's all fine and good right now. But if you don't go out there and compete with Georgia tomorrow, that feeling and sentiment's going to flip real quick. And there could be a lot of ill will come Monday in Tuscaloosa. Huge game. Huge game. A lot of implications for the SEC and the college football playoff riding on this game going into tomorrow night. We're thankful that we get this game scheduled. But there's a lot of teams around the country, like Ole Miss, that haven't really been pressed yet. Joe Klatt, on his podcast yesterday or the other day, brought up a really interesting point about scheduling in college football. I feel like today's kind of the perfect opportunity to dive into that as we kind of assess the state of college football scheduling, which I think we can all agree can be much, much better. We'll dive into that coming up on the other side. But first, I got to tell you about our friends over at Canty Foundation Specialist. Again, it is raining. It has been pouring all night. There is a lot of water around the Midlands. There might be flooding going on around your home. And if you have a crawl space, you need to make sure there's no standing water under your home. And you need to make sure very quickly. Because if you do have standing water under your home, that can lead to things like high humidity and condensation for mold, mildew, and pests, including things like termites that can really have damaging effects on your home. Not only your home, but also your quality of life inside that home. Because about half the air that you breathe comes from your crawl space. So if you've got mold and mildew and all that kind of stuff, you're breathing that in. You and your family are breathing that air in. You don't want that. That's where our friends at Canty Foundation Specialist come in. Go online and schedule an appointment today at cantycanfix.com. I imagine they're going to be very busy over these next couple of days evaluating foundations and crawl spaces. Make sure yours gets checked out too. So again, you and your family can be in good shape going forward. Canty Foundation Specialist, schedule an appointment online at cantycanfixit.com. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Football Friday here on the game. Again, hopefully everybody's staying safe out there with the weather. I believe the worst of it is done here in Columbia. The rain seems to have dissipated. Still some nasty winds as I was driving in. Of course, a lot of trees down, power lines, those kind of things. I know I've been without power at my apartment since about 5 a.m. So hopefully everybody can get that power restored and everything can be okay here as the day rolls along. I think the sun's actually supposed to be out later today, so looking forward to that. Reminder as well, there's no football this weekend for South Carolina, but when they return next weekend, your next opportunity to win the Lawyer Lisa Special Teams Touchdown Contest, $500 in the pot coming up next weekend, waiting for South Carolina to score a Special Teams touchdown. Go online to 1075thegame.com and register for your chance to win that money. And, of course, they don't get one next weekend. $600 rolls over to the Alabama game coming up that next Saturday. I think it goes without saying that not all schedules in college football are created equal. I just said a little bit earlier that, Ole Miss has had a cake of a schedule through their non-conference slate early on. Now, they still got to play like Georgia and stuff later on in the year, but you probably wouldn't say they have the toughest schedule in the SEC compared to somebody like Florida that just has a murderer's row that is probably going to end up leading to Billy Napier getting fired. And this is a thing across all college football. It's not just in the SEC, but I think this is a significant conversation to have now, especially with the expanded college football playoff. Because in years past, to make the BCS National Championship game or make the college football playoff 4 team, you had to be undefeated or have one loss. Like that was the standard. Melanie's LSU back in 2007, of course, but that year was wacky enough. But you basically had no margin for error. So even if you had an easy schedule, you couldn't afford to trip up on any games, or if you tripped on one game, it couldn't be to any kind of bad opponent. Well, that's not the case anymore. We have a 12-team playoff where we think that if you're like a 10-win SEC team, you're probably going to get in. So where does the strength of schedule come into play there? Because look at somebody like Missouri, who's being regarded as having one of the easier schedules in all of the SEC. Yeah, they play Alabama, but they don't get Texas. They don't get Georgia. They don't get Ole Miss. They don't get Tennessee. They get off relatively clean. They got Oklahoma, who's still ranked right now, but of course that team doesn't look all that great. Like, they got a pretty easy schedule, all things considered, that could land them in the college football playoff without having to play as many tough opponents as a Georgia or an Alabama or a Tennessee or whatever it may be. So it begs the question of, how do you fix scheduling in college football? I was listening to Joe Klatt's podcast, which is very good, very insightful. He, of course, does color for Big Noon Saturdays on Fox with Gus Johnson. I would recommend his podcast if you're looking for a new one to add to your rotation. But he brought up a really interesting point about potentially fixing the scheduling in college football.
The randomness of how schedules are made in the Super Conference era has got to end. It has to end. And I understand this is the first year of the Super Conference, but even then, this cannot be the schedule lottery at this point. I think it's too important, and it's too easy of a fix. Teams that finish higher in previous years should have more difficult schedule in subsequent years. And I believe that should happen on the conference level. I also believe that should happen on the non-conference level. That is way too easy of a fix. Think of it this way. The more you turn, like if there are levers, okay, and you have like, hey, there are things we can do as a conference or an entity that will make competition higher. If you pull those levers, it makes the product better. The more levers that you pull that make it easier for some teams to succeed versus others, then your product hurts. That's why the NFL is so much better than Major League Baseball, because the product levers of competition are pulled much more stringently in the NFL. Basically, I believe that we should have schedules based on where you finish within the conference. I believe that we should have schedules that are made for you in the non-conference as well. I don't think schedules should be made way out into the distance.
Look, I'm with him. I think he brings up a really good point. And he also used the example of Missouri's schedule. Remember, Missouri finished in the top 10 last year. They won the Cotton Bowl. They were one of the best teams in the SEC. And then they get this easy schedule this year, which creates a very easy path to double-digit wins and maybe the college football playoff compared to Georgia or Texas or Alabama or whatever it may be. And he brings up a good point because the NFL does do a good job of taking what you did in one season and giving you a schedule that is challenging for where you sit in the standings. So for those that don't know, the NFL, which of course you have to play your 3 teams within your division, and then you play one other division within the NFC or AFC, and vice versa. So you have set games on your schedule that are going to happen that are already predetermined. But then they will match you up with the finisher of a same spot in other divisions. So if the Falcons finish third in the NFC East, or excuse me, the NFC South, and they're not already scheduled to play anybody from the NFC East, they will get the third place team from the NFC East, the Giants, the Commanders, whatever it may be, because that creates that similarity of schedule based on what you did last year. And look, I get it. It's trickier to do something like that in college football, but we've lived in this era of games being scheduled 10 and 12 years down the line for non-conference, right? Like, how many times do you see, hey, so-and-so is going to play whoever in 2036, and you do the math in your head, and you're like, the kids that are going to play in that game are like 5 right now. You know what I mean? Like, it's insane how far out these things get scheduled. And as we go to this, as Joe Klatt called it, super conference era, which I think we're going to continue to trend down this path, I'd love to see scheduling that kind of reflects that. I think within your own conference, if you are one of the top teams from the year before, you should have to play 3 or 4 of the other top teams from that prior year. Yeah, you'll still get to play the Vanderbilts and, Mississippi States or teams on the lower end, but if you're deemed one of the best teams, your competition level should be very high, like what Georgia's schedule is this year. And then when we think outside of the conference, yes, if you're like, South Carolina and, Florida and teams like that, you'll still get to play your non-conference rival of Clemson or Florida State or wherever it may be if you have that. But the other games, at least for 2 of them, you can still keep your one FCS cupcake. That's fine. But the other 2 games, why not play a team in the ACC or the Big 12 that finished in the same spot as you? If South Carolina finishes 7th in the SEC this year, I'd like to see them play the 7th team from the Big 12 next year and the 7th team from the Big 10 next year. Again, it's very comparable. Now, again, that's not a perfect way to do it, and it's not always going to guarantee that every single schedule is uniform in toughness across the board, but I think it's better than what we have now. Because, again, you give these teams the ability to make their own non-conference schedules way in advance. And sure, you can schedule a game against Virginia Tech like South Carolina has next year to open the season in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. We don't know how good Virginia Tech's going to be. That game was made years ago. So you get to that game and it's like, oh, it's a Power 4 opponent, not a quality opponent, because they're not that good. Or at least we don't think they're going to be that good based on how they've started the season so far. So again, if we make this more of a fluid thing where the results of one year carry over to the next year, I think we have a better college football product overall. And quite frankly, it saves us from some of the Saturdays we've had so far this year where you're really struggling to find a good game. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you may not be the most excited to see, I don't know, Kentucky play BYU, but if they are seen as even type of teams, then I'll check it out. Could be a fun game. Could be a competitive game. I just think there's a lot of opportunity here with scheduling that as we transition into this new era of college football, super conferences, whatever you want to call it, there's an opportunity here. Now, again, like everything in college football, you're going to have to upend what has been a long, storied system that people will clutch their pearls over that they don't want to change. But if we can have a 12-team playoff, there's no reason why we can't make scheduling a little bit better across the board. That's my hope. Joe Klatt brings up a really good point. Just wanted to weigh in on that because I think he's really onto something, and I think that could create just, again, a better product of college football from top to bottom on a year-to-year basis. I've talked a lot about SEC in this hour. There's one team in the ACC that I think might have the clearest path to the college football playoff right now, and they're playing tonight. We'll dive into that coming up next. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Football Friday here on The Game.
Well, it starts with him. I mean, he's exactly what you want in a quarterback, in a teammate, in a colleague, and a business partner. He's just a very driven, motivated guy that is all about preparation and winning. And when I say winning, he doesn't care much about personal accolades. He wants to perform to the best of his abilities to help the team win and help guys get better. So he's got a great supporting cast. You know, the offensive line's done a good job. The defense has been outstanding. The receivers, tight ends, running backs have all stepped up, and he's been the alpha leader of the team. So it's worked out really well.
Welcome back into the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Football Friday here on The Game. That was Miami head coach Mario Cristobal talking about his transfer quarterback, Cam Ward, and the great start that Miami's had to the season so far. You know, like Texas, Miami's a brand, right? Like Miami had their heyday with the U and all that kind of stuff back in the 80s and 90s and Jimmy Johnson, all those kind of things where they were not only the talk of college football, they were the talk of the sports world. And that lasted all the way up until the early 2000s. That 2001 Miami team is regarded by many as one of the greatest college football teams of all time. But since then, they haven't had a ton of success. They've had some good seasons here and there. What Mark Richt had them at 10 wins back in 2017, a couple years ago, but the success hasn't been quite where they hoped it would. This year's a little bit different. And again, like Texas, they're a brand that commands a lot of attention. And when Miami's good, people will talk about Miami. Again, I think back to that 2017 season where there was so much buzz about the U being back. They had the turnover chain and all those kind of things. And people want Miami to succeed because it is a big name in college football, one that has had a lot of success over the years. And I think they got a very good chance to be back in the mix as one of the top teams in college football, specifically this year. They're going to be in action tonight, taking on Virginia Tech. That game will be down in Miami, 7:30 kick on ESPN. And their schedule looked a little tougher prior to the season, but I look at it now, and I think it sets up pretty well for them. Their toughest challenge remaining is a trip to Louisville in a couple weeks, which that's not going to be easy. But, I mean, the Florida State game doesn't look tough now. At Georgia Tech versus Wake Forest, at Syracuse, like these are games that they should have no problem handling their business against. And I think they have a very good shot at running the table and being in Charlotte for the ACC championship game. According to ESPN's Football Power Index, they have the 4th best odds in the nation right now to win out and the 7th best odds to reach the college football playoff. Now, you potentially do have a date with Clemson, if Clemson continues to win at the clip they've been winning at, possibly in the ACC championship game. The debate comes of how many teams from the ACC can get in the college football playoff, because I think, especially with Florida State being down as they are right now, not a whole lot of people are looking at that conference as good across the board as the SEC or the Big Ten or even the Big 12 as of right now. So there may only be one spot up for grabs when it comes to the ACC, which would, of course, go to the ACC champion, depending on how things shake out as the season rolls along. Cam Ward is the biggest reason why they're having so much success. Of course, he transferred over from Washington State a year ago, was one of the most sought-after quarterbacks in the transfer portal this offseason. So Miami won the lottery with that, and he's certainly shown everything that's been expected of him through their first couple games of the year. He's second in passing yards and has the most touchdowns in all of college football. Xavier Restrepo, a big-time wide receiver. Those guys having a good connection. He was a 1,000-yard guy last year. Seems to be on track with doing that again. The biggest factor to me is, can Mario Cristobal prove that he's capable of leading a team to a perfect season? Mario Cristobal is a good head coach. Mario Cristobal is a very good recruiter. But between his time at Miami and his time at Oregon, before he got to Miami, he always had a knack of tripping up on a team that he had no excuse tripping up on. Obviously, last year, the most publicized one was Georgia Tech, a game that they had in the bag. All they had to do was kneel on the ball, run the clock out, and they would escape with a victory. Tight victory, but a victory nonetheless. They ran the ball, they fumbled, and of course the rest is history. Haynes King leads Georgia Tech down the field with a huge throw, and they end up winning that game. And Miami became a laughingstock for a couple of weeks, and that's something we're going to talk about for a very long time to come. But that falls right in line with the history of Mario Cristobal as a head coach. Last year it was Georgia Tech. The year before that, it was Middle Tennessee State that beat Miami at home. Let's go back to his time at Oregon, a 3-9 Stanford team. I think a 1-win Cal team back in 2020, a very poor, around 500-ish Arizona State team on what was a very talented Oregon team. Like, he just has this knack of always finding a way to lose a game they have no reason to lose. Because it's one thing to lose to quality opponents. Like, if they went on the road and lost to Louisville in a couple weeks, okay, sure, that's Louisville. They're right now a ranked team. That's fine. But I'm looking at the schedule right now, and man, if you told me they tripped against Cal on the road with Cal, the way they played so far at the start of the season, including a win over Auburn, it'd be like, yeah, that's pretty on brand. So can Mario Cristobal this year prove that he's not that coach anymore? He's got the talent on both sides of football. They are one of the most talented teams in all the country, and they're playing like it. They have been manhandling everybody, including Florida, in week number 1 so far this season. Can they keep that going? Or is that one slip going to come? Because, again, there's no room for error in the ACC. You slip against a weak team and you don't win the conference championship, even at 11-1, you're probably not going to get in because the conference as a whole is viewed as being down. Miami has the opportunity to walk their way into the playoff by running through the schedule, and even if they don't win the conference championship game, if things set up right and they're undefeated with the one loss being to, let's say, Clemson in the championship game in Charlotte, they might have a chance. But they can't trip or choke on a cupcake, however you want to phrase it, on an easy team as the schedule goes along. Virginia Tech, not as good as people thought they were going to be this season. Interesting game tonight, again, 7:30 on ESPN. That'll do it for today's edition of The Extra Point. Coming up next is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs as your Football Friday rolls on here on the game. 11 o'clock on your Friday morning. Welcome in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell. We're all here. Wes making it in right as the show starts, as always, but we'll give you an excuse today because there was, external factors factoring
Out
in.
here dodging trees.
That's a good Saban word, Tyler. Saban phrase.
Yeah, external factors.
Yes. It's one of his favorites.
Interesting drive in this morning. Few trees down, power lines out. I hope the power's back on by the time I get home here in a couple hours because I think it's been out since like 5 a.m. according to my phone. So, been an interesting morning so far.
Yeah, shout out to everybody. Hope you are staying safe. The road is like weirdly dry, I think, from the amount of wind.
Yes, it's been just blown dry. Like the water isn't the problem. There's debris.
Right. Yeah, but it definitely
everywhere.
rained last night.
Oh, it did.
Very hard. And then there's literally parts of Columbia you're driving, you're like, it's not even wet anymore because the wind is so constant, I guess.
I thought I was in the middle of a hurricane when I woke up this morning to the rain and 60 mile an hour wind gusts.
And that's what we were trying to explain to our kids who were, they're young, and so they don't understand why we can't, use the microwave when the power's out or, watch TV, whatever it is. And we're like, look, it's bad in other parts. Like, we don't have power. This is nothing compared to what people in, like, the panhandle of Florida are going through.
Oh, yeah.
Where nobody has power. There's unfortunately been some fatalities. And I'll tell you, I went out this morning. I couldn't, I'm addicted to coffee, unfortunately.
Right.
Like, I have to have it or I can't function. It's a vice. It is what it is. And so I was like, we're fine. We're planning last night. I've got this power bank. I'm like, I'll plug up the coffee maker to the power bank. It'll be fine. I plug it up this morning, turn it on. It won't run. I'm like, this thing runs a computer, but I can't make coffee.
Oh, a coffee maker?
I didn't realize it was
a lot of power, I think.
It's like
Learned that one the hard way.
Yeah. So point is, I have to run out.
Yep.
I go out and I'm on Highway 6 out in Irmo Ballantyne area, and there is a tree that I'm like, that is a huge tree. It's snapped. I'm like, that looks bad, but it was on the side of the road. So I passed it. When I came back, that tree was laying across the road. I'm like, that thing could have hit me.
Yeah.
While I was driving across the road to get coffee. So, but shout out in the gas station. There's a gas station in that area who has, it's one of the famous, well, it's not famous, but it's like, how in the Southeast we have like fried chicken and breakfast at all the gas stations?
Sure.
And they have all that. And so we went out there and got coffee and food and saw a DOT worker, Wes, who asked me the status of recruiting after the LSU game. We ran into each other, so that was awesome. Told him to be safe.
Hey, Cruton never takes a day off.
Not even when there's terrible weather. Not at all.
Yeah, I actually just I ran into our friend Shelly Smith
Oh, really?
today as well. So
Shout out Shelly.
she was getting coffee this morning. But yeah, hope everybody, like y'all said, hope everybody is safe out there and doesn't have too much property damage.
It's interesting that you brought up recruiting. It's something we've touched on a little bit this week. We've kind of talked about, the guys that were on campus, this past weekend for the Akron game, the LSU game, and all that. But we haven't really kind of dove into the 2025 class in a while. Obviously, once the season gets started here, we kind of put that to the back burner. But we're right at, 2 months away from early signing day. And, Carolina was able to bring in quite a few recruits over the summer as far as commitments go. Right now, this according to On3, they are sitting 32nd nationally with their recruiting class, 15th in the SEC, though. So still some work to do. But as you guys talked about earlier on in the week, there are still some names out there to keep an eye on to see who might still commit before December.
Yeah, I mean, I think this thing has sort of pushed back to the forefront. I mean, I was curious personally, how many more guys will they even add for this class, or will most of the rest of the class be more like transfer portal guys? And we've seen them, in my opinion, sort of take an approach where they're like, we're not going to reach on guys. And it used to be, you're going to take about 25 guys per class. And, of course, transfer portal was not a thing. And sometimes you'd oversign that number, and it'd be more like 27, 28. Some teams would get into the 30s. Other years it'd be more like, 23, 22, something like that. For the most part, though, you kind of were like, all right, we got to fill out our spots. And if you didn't with the guys you wanted, like let's say you missed on a handful of guys, then you say, all right, who's next? What's our next level of recruit? You still have that to an extent, but I feel like there's a lot more of just, hey, if we don't hit on some of these top guys, let's just save the scholarship and go transfer portal at this position. And so I was curious to see how this class would play out. Now, the interesting thing you're seeing happen is that there's a number of guys who are already committed to other programs that are seemingly still very interested in South Carolina. So you kind of go into these last, like you said, believe it or not, last 2 months, hard to believe for 2025 class, and say, all right, well, there's a number of guys, maybe the biggest name here locally is Malik Clark. And so he visits South Carolina last week. Shane Beamer tweets yesterday that he's in Rock Hill. I was told by a couple of my local people up that way that Beamer did stop by Rock Hill High School. So, I think you look at some of these guys that maybe not South Carolina fans like gave up on, but just were like, that was a miss. But now you see them continuing to push for him. You got 2 in-state tight ends, and Michael Skinner and then Mike Tyler. Mike right down the road here at Hammond, South Carolina, and Mike have sort of the mutual interest has picked up as of late, I think is the best way to say it. And so, you do have a number of guys that we're still tracking as this thing gets closer, which actually could nudge that class, if they land those guys, back into what you want, which in my opinion is you want to be in top 25. Like that's a really good sort of bar to try to clear for every single class.
Mike and Mike at tight end.
Yeah.
Tyler, do we have a symbol crashing?
Writes itself.
That was awful. Need some new material.
Good dad joke.
Yes. On one hand, and I think, Tyler, your numbers there actually caught me off guard. They are obviously correct. You're the stat guy here. I think, yesterday or the day before, South Carolina was like 30th, right? So a little bit of adjustment there. That they update the team rankings in real time. So on one hand, if you don't contextualize the recruiting class and you just go look at this thing and it's, oh man, there's 16 teams in the SEC now. South Carolina is 15th. The only team behind them is Vandy. And then you look around and you go, oh man, the teams that are above South Carolina, Mississippi State, who stinks, Arkansas, Kentucky, and you could cause yourself some anxiety and alarm if you look at it that way. But then you look at the other side of it, which is just what you laid out, Wes. Like this, there's a lot of factors here. This thing's not over. South Carolina got a good bit of volume in their high school recruiting class early. You still have the portal. I've been given reason to believe, South Carolina was really active in the portal in the last class. We went over that yesterday. They're going to be still very active in the portal this cycle. I don't know if it'll be quite as high a number of guys as last year, but every year under Shane Beamer, they've taken a pretty sizable portal class. I've been given some indications that there will be some volume in the portal class again. Then you look at it, the 11th best team in the SEC in terms of just recruiting rankings, Ole Miss. And Ole Miss, under Lane Kiffin, has done extremely well at recruiting, but one of the areas they've done very well in, the transfer portal. Jim Nagy of the Reese's Senior Bowl, I'm going to keep bringing up this stat. He says they have the most NFL-graded talent on their team of any program in college football. So, if you just look at a list and say, they're South Carolina's 15th, you could start to get worried about that. You don't want to finish 15th, but there's still a lot of room to go. Ole Miss, if I had to guess, they're going to finish higher than 11th. If I had to guess on South Carolina, they're probably going to finish higher than 15th as well. The other thing is, man, I mean, you're right, Wes. You do want to be top 25 in recruiting, but, man, like top 25 in recruiting, you can be 10th in the SEC. You remember South Carolina's best all-time finish was, 6th or 7th in that 2007 class? it was like 4th in the SEC. You know, just so many teams recruit so well in this conference.
Yeah, speaking of Ole Miss, at some point today, I want to do a little way too early preview. I know they still have Kentucky this week, but I do want to talk about that game a little bit. But I think this is where, like, I'll defend the rankings to an extent, and I especially, like, people who are just live and die by the rankings, I'll push back on that, especially for an individual player. For a group of players, I really push back with people who are just like, the rankings don't matter. Well, look at the teams finishing in the top, and then look at the teams finishing, like, competing for a national title every year. I mean, that's really all the evidence you need, in my opinion. However, I do think the rankings do have a little bit of a problem in the transfer portal era in that, first of all, first we didn't even include the portal stuff in the actual rankings. And it was like, hey, here's a high school ranking, and then, here's a portal ranking. And then the sites have tried to include them in there, but as of right now, you look at that number, and nobody has a portal class yet because the portal's not open. So what does your portal class look like? And then, surprisingly, I feel like the recruiting industry, you would think with more data on who a player is as a college player, not just a high school or JUCO player, you would think you would have a better idea of how to rank them as a portal prospect. Surprisingly, it's not as easy as you might think because there's so many guys. It's happening so quickly. And how many of these guys get ranked a certain way because, they were a 4 or 5 star guy in high school but didn't do anything in college? I mean, Kyle Kennard was pretty highly ranked, but Kyle Kennard wasn't like, South Carolina just went out and got the number 1 edge in the transfer portal. Who out there out of the portal is doing more than him as an edge / defensive end / pass rush guy?
Nobody.
The Princely kid at Ole Miss, I mean, that was a huge get for them. They hammered the D-line overall in the portal. Those guys have been a huge difference maker for Ole Miss.
The Virginia Tech guy who came from Florida. But that might have not even been last year. He's like leading the nation in sacks.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, point being, if you look at it now, you'd be like, whoever your number 1 edge guy is in the portal, I don't know, maybe there's a guy who's done as much, but Kennard should be in that conversation, right? When he committed, it was, it's a good get. It's not like...
It'll be solid.
It's not like you were sitting there saying, this guy's going to change their entire front. In my opinion, the addition of him and Dylan have changed the entire, what you, even think of the front 6 for South Carolina. So I tend to think, if you're at a school like South Carolina, you gotta just find a way to be in that top 25 every year. Like, you just got to stack top 25s. And yeah, that might mean you're 10th, 9th, 12th, whatever. But stack top 25s, evaluate the state very well, and hit the portal very hard, and you'll have a chance. That doesn't mean you're going to win a national title or be in the playoff, but you're going to have a chance as opposed to sort of what we saw at the end of the Muschamp era.
By the way, that Virginia Tech player, Antoine Powell Ryland, transferred 2 years ago. So he's been at VT for 2 years. So Kyle Kennard, yes, is the most successful as far as sacks from this year's cycle of transfer guys. As Wes mentioned, I want to take a little bit of a look at Ole Miss. They have a test tomorrow for the first time this season, taking on Kentucky, and we'll dive into that as we look ahead to next weekend's matchup here in Columbia. Is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here in the game. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs, Tower Head, West Mitchell. Chris Clark along with you on this Football Friday. South Carolina's first bye week. Players off for the long weekend before they jump back in at the start of next week. Coaches out on the recruiting trail, going to be visiting a lot of high schools this weekend, and a chance to kind of sit back and relax a little bit, take in all the other college football going on tomorrow, including the first opportunity to really maybe take a look at Ole Miss, who hasn't really played anybody of note this season. They've handled their opponents pretty easily. They got the best point differential in the SEC so far. Haven't really had to break a sweat, but they do take on Kentucky tomorrow, a team that, again, 2 weeks ago took number 1 Georgia to the limit. So we might finally start learning some things about this Ole Miss team ahead of next weekend's game.
Yeah, I mean, I think we already know they're pretty dang good. I think the question is this a elite? Is this like a I mean, our categories we talked about before the year, maybe they've shifted a little bit, but for the most part, Georgia, Texas, maybe Alabama, Ohio State, maybe Oregon. Those are the elite teams, in my opinion. Is Ole Miss there, or are they a notch below? And I don't know if we learn that this week, but I think we start to learn a little bit more. Like, if they just blow the doors off of Kentucky, that probably means something. And, you know, so far, I think the thing that stands out to me about this Ole Miss team, their offense is as advertised, but their defense has been locked down. And I think we're used to seeing them. Remember when we were talking about South Carolina's defense just sort of, other than the one play, just completely locking down Akron? I feel like Ole Miss is one of those teams. We've seen their defense maybe against, quote, lesser opponents, like kind of give up that yardage in between the 20s. And, you know, their defense at times has not been that great, but their offense is just so overwhelming that if you're an outmatched team, they're just going to wear you down. You're going to have to sort of push the issue a little bit, feel like you have to go for it on 4th down. You start turning the ball over, and they win these blowouts that just feel a little bit different. This year, it's been, hey, we're going to score at some of these teams, man. They're scoring like almost every drive Ole Miss is in the first half before they just say, oh, we're putting our backups in. And on the other side, the defense is shutting them down as well. So I think it is a legitimate Ole Miss team, but we just don't quite know to what level that is. I do think what they've done in the portal on the defensive line is impressive. I think their defense is a lot better. They've got a lot of good coaches on that side of the ball, a lot of just veteran, experienced coaches on that side of the ball. I do still think there are some questions when you really dive into their offensive line and their running game. And so that's something where the question becomes, is there a team out there good enough to expose that and then good enough to make it matter? And I don't think Kentucky is that team, but can Kentucky show us a few little just instances of some dents in the armor? I think will be fascinating to watch at noon tomorrow. I think.
Nooner.
Yep, noon on ABC.
I assume, Wes, just for clarity, that when you mentioned some of the dents in the armor and like the run game, the O-line, in a relative sense, right? Because sometimes you will see a team that, even teams that have beat up on their early opponents where they're not tested, but you can kind of identify an area of that team where you go, they're a really good team, but they're just not that great at this particular thing. I think the Ole Miss, run game, O-line, questions as you maybe get into playing Kentucky, South Carolina, Georgia, teams like that, overall still pretty good, right? I mean, like you look at I guess their best test so far is Wake Forest, who's only beaten North Carolina A&T. Like, Wake Forest is not a good football team. They rushed for 272 yards, 6 yards a carry, but they haven't been tested.
Yeah, I just think once they play a really good defensive line.
Yeah.
Well, I don't even know if Kentucky can expose it, honestly. But I'll be curious to see. Like, that's a big physical Kentucky front, and I think I think you look at this Ole Miss team. I'm comparing them to Texas, Bama, Georgia. What are they missing? And the one area in the portal that I would say they didn't win was running back because, yeah, they went out and got some guys, but you had, a top 5 back in the country in Judkins, in my opinion, and a guy who is a perfect fit for, hey, we're going to spread you out and throw the ball all down the field, and then we're going to hand the ball to this guy who is a 70-yard run waiting to happen. And so I don't think they just have that completely dynamic back, and I do think if you look back to over the years under Kiffin, and they've steadily gotten better, the teams that have been able to just shut them down, no surprise, have been the teams that have been able to dominate them up front. So that, to me, is the area they have tried to improve the most because that's been the biggest question mark for them. Maybe they prove it's not a question anymore, but I think if you're looking for weaknesses, that's where you go. I do think defensively in the secondary, if you have a passing game, which, I don't know if Carolina has the passing game that can expose them. I don't know that Kentucky does either. But when you face a much better passing game with some more dynamic wide receivers, the stats maybe won't show this, but they can get a little bit handsy in the secondary, which sometimes is a sign that they're struggling to actually match up and keep up.
Well, I'm interested to see because right now Ole Miss is right behind the South Carolina in the SEC in terms of overall sacks. Again, they haven't played any great offensive lines up to that point, but we obviously know what Carolina did from a pass rush standpoint against Kentucky a couple weeks ago. Can this defensive front of Ole Miss do something similar? Because that's going to be a very big factor next weekend's game if South Carolina can keep Sellers upright against what we think is going to be another good pass rush.
Yeah, and then on the other side, Carolina's pass rush against their offensive line. You could have another sort of heavyweight fight, but in this case, it's both D-lines have proved at times that they can be dominant. And so if you're Carolina, you start to look ahead to this thing, I would dare say you have to have a great performance from your defensive line if you're going to have any shot against Ole Miss, because I think I talked about this after the Furman game. They sort of, at times, Ole Miss almost breaks what you traditionally think of as what should work against a particular defense. And they are so aggressive in how they throw the football down the field against outmatched opponents. So if you try to play zone against them, a lot of times there's more than one way to attack a zone defense, but a lot of teams, especially if you are getting pressure up front, you're going to have to throw underneath the zone. Well, against opponents like Ole Miss has played so far, they're able to give Dart enough time. They're so dynamic at wide receiver. They just basically run these combination routes way deep down the field, and it basically, as they get further and further, the zone stretches more and more and more and more, and they attack the zone down the field. And so the real thing to watch will be, can some of these other teams force them, if they want to sit in zone, can they force them to have to actually throw underneath it the way the zone was built to work? And then a ton of those dynamic plays actually go away. Then you're playing real football. You're not playing – they're basically playing video game football so far against a lot of these teams. Like Furman, they're trying to drop back in a zone and keep everything in front, but it doesn't work because of how dynamic Ole Miss is at wide receiver.
A lot of reason to focus in on that game coming up tomorrow. Again, noon kick on ABC, and then all eyes of college football going to be on Tuscaloosa tomorrow night between Georgia and Alabama. We'll dive into that matchup a little bit coming up next, but it's still September. That means it is Hunger Action Month. The game and Hardee's teaming up. For the Hardee's Roundup, just go to your participating Hardee's and round up your bill to the nearest dollar amount. All donations go to the Harvest Hope Food Bank for students. The big matchup tomorrow night in Tuscaloosa. We'll hit that coming up next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game.
So Rashad Amos has 8 carries.
All right, guys. As always, this show brought to you by our friends at Firehouse Subs. Head on over to firehousesubs.com right now or download the Firehouse Subs app. But if you've been listening, you already have the Firehouse Subs app, which we're thankful. They're thankful. And you can be thankful, too, because no matter where you are in the Midlands there's a Firehouse Subs near you. 14 conveniently located Firehouse Subs restaurants. And Chris, they got more on the way. That's what my inside information tells me. You tried the Captain's Club? You did. What'd you think?
I had the Captain's Club. It's really good. And actually, yesterday, I had one that's been on the menu for a while, but is moving up the power rankings. Spicy Cajun chicken.
Okay.
Ooh, if you want something hot, spicy.
Larry
Really
Chandler
good.
put you back on that one last time we were out there.
Yep.
Captain's Club has Captain Sorensen's hot sauce, new Firehouse Hero sauce, and I don't even have time to say everything else that's on it, but it does have bacon. Hit up Firehouse Subs right now.
Well, I think you probably see it. So you added a little bit to the end of the question, but I think the turnovers and just how well they've taken care of the football and knowing how big of a deal that is in field position each and every game, but especially a game like this. And then I just think that, the offense is getting into a rhythm and the defense is doing a good job of trying to keep them out of it. You got some strong defenses here. We know that they haven't allowed a touchdown, through their season here. And that's impressive. You're going to have to put plays on top of each other, but a lot of it to me just starts out with taking care of the football.
Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. That was the voice of Alabama head coach Kalen DeBoer on some keys to the game tomorrow night as Georgia comes into town. 7:30 kick on ABC. Number 2 Georgia versus number 4 Alabama. One of the biggest games of the entire year in college football, and really the chance for one of these teams to establish themselves, at least for the time being, as the top dog of the conference.
I got fired up for this game. I ran across Saban's pregame. From what game would that have been, Tyler?
Which one?
He's in the locker room. The pregame speech. He even mentions Kirby. Little Kirby said, We ain't what we used to be.
That
That
may have
type
been
of
from
thing.
last year's SEC championship game.
I'm thinking it might have been I was almost thinking it might have been the game where the national title game where Tua threw
Okay. All the way back then. Okay.
I'm thinking that might have been it. But anyway, I got fired up for this game because of that. Yeah, it's going to be a heavyweight fight. I feel like the consensus. What's the line on that game, Tyler?
Last I looked, Georgia favored by 1, which, again, Alabama's rarely a dog at home.
Well, yeah, they shouldn't be. I mean, based on history. I'm still – I did pick Georgia. But I feel like some people are writing off Bama. And a lot of people are pointing to, hey, you saw they struggled with South Florida. Well, last year they struggled with South Florida even worse. We all remember the images of the kind of haggard-looking Nick Saban in that rainy game, walking into the tunnel at halftime. That Alabama team ended up making the playoff. So Kalen DeBoer, some people kind of still always unproven. At Bama, yes. He took Washington to the national title game in year 2. He's lost like 12 games in his coaching career. Guy's a really good coach. And now he's inherited a Bama program that still has a lot of talent left over from the Saban era. So, Georgia, if we're going the whole, they looked pretty shaky last week. Kentucky. Georgia looked pretty darn shaky against Kentucky, who, again, I don't think Kentucky's a bad football team at all. Some people wrote them off after the Gamecocks whooped them. I think the Gamecocks just whipped them in Lexington. Kentucky's still a solid team. So I think this one's going to be a close one. I really do.
By the way, I checked. The line's actually moved in favor of Bama now. This is ESPN bets. At least
What?
they're favored by half a point as of right now. So a little bit of movement right before.
Just make it a pick 'em.
The day before. So it essentially is a pick 'em at this point in time. Look, this could go either way. I agree with you. There's a lot of people that look back to what Bama did against South Florida or Georgia did against Kentucky and say, well, they're vulnerable. But I think in both ways, both programs are glad they had those games in the first 4 weeks because you get that out of your system. And look, Georgia every year has one game where they play uncharacteristically sloppy. The Saban Bama teams did that a lot over the years too, or like why they only beat Arkansas by 7 points, then go out there and bludgeon a top 10 LSU the next week or whatever it may be. So these two teams are going to bring their A game tomorrow night, and this is definitely going to be a 4-quarter heavyweight fight.
So Kirby, in the interview right after the Kentucky game on the field, paraphrasing, I think he kind of indicated, I don't know if my guys got the message this week about maybe what Kentucky was capable of.
Right.
I do want, these are still human beings as much as we want to say and think they're robots and, you've just built this machine at Georgia. I put almost no stock in that game, in terms of just like what it means big picture wise, because I do wonder, did you have the little classic, was there a classic look ahead? Mm-hmm. Even for a program as usually like disciplined in terms of what they do on the field as Georgia, that can happen. And so I do wonder if they looked ahead a little bit. I don't know if you can put, USF played Bama very, very, very close. I don't put any stock in any of that stuff. I think both these teams are going to play a very tight football game on Saturday. Are we doing picks at the end or we don't?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, we should pick some games.
Sure. Let's do it.
At the very end? So not now?
We'll do the last segment.
Okay.
Well, I already spoiled I didn't do a score pick, but I spoiled it.
I might go against Chris on this one. I'll just say that.
Okay.
Let's go.
And against Tyler.
You're assuming that I'm
how
picking
do you
Georgia.
know? Tyler may have the Tide big. You don't know.
Tyler, you probably know more about this game than anybody in this building right now. What's your key to victory for either side?
Georgia has to slow down Ryan Williams, which, by the way, I said this earlier.
Good.
The drinking game tomorrow is how many times his age gets mentioned. Because if you don't know, he's 17, and they will bring that up quite a few times.
He should still be in high school.
This is like the Jake Bentley.
Yes.
Exactly. He's an explosive play threat. 3 of his 4 touchdowns this year have been on plays of 20-plus yards. And, again, you heard Kalen DeBoer mention it. Georgia's defense is not allowed touchdown this year. A field goal to Clemson and Tennessee Tech, and then 4 to Kentucky the other week. But nobody's crossed the goal line against them. But Alabama is going to push the limit on that. Jalen Milroe, not good with the mid-range, very good at throwing the ball deep, though. I'm interested. The matchup is Julian Humphrey is the best cover corner that Georgia has. I imagine he's going to be matched up with Ryan Williams in this game. But Georgia also has really good coverage safeties as well. They got KJ Bolden. They got Dan Jackson. Guys like that in the back end. Malachi Stark's obviously one of the best safeties in the country. So can they contain him on the back end and prevent those explosive plays? Because if you keep Alabama from being able to hit you deep, I think you can contain that offense.
But
they
have the run threat.
They do.
Of Jalen Milroe.
They have not only Jalen Milroe, Jam Miller, Justice Hayes. Like, they kind of have a 3-headed monster back there, and they've been running at will so far this season. Georgia struggled to stop the run last weekend, or 2 weeks ago against Kentucky. They gave up $170 on the ground. Mm-hmm. So, and they're not. Michael Williams is questionable for this game. So, how much of a factor that is going to be? Like, that's also a pretty big key to this game as well.
When your quarterback is dynamic as him in the running game, though, can you do you have to bring one of those safeties up and devote it to the running game? And, I think if the front, however Bama spreads you out, let's say they're spreading you out, it's like a front 6. Can you control Milroe in the running game with just those guys? And then you do have a couple of too high safeties, much to the chagrin of Mel Kiper, to control the downfield passing game. If Bama is sitting there chunking off 6 here, 8 there, and you're having to bring that person up to account for Milroe, then I think that's what opens things up down the field. And, is Nick Saban on the sideline anymore? No, but to Chris's point earlier, I don't know if you could have went out and hired. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the whole thing burns to the ground. I don't know if you could have hired a better replacement. Usually the guy who replaces the guy, everybody's going, this is a huge drop-off. I don't know if there's many people that were available out there that would be a smaller drop-off than DeBoer is, going from the GOAT. We've all sort of agreed, the GOAT.
Yeah.
To Kalen DeBoer.
Well, nobody's proven as much that was in the running for this job. People said, Dan Lanning and stuff like that. Like, Lanning's had good Oregon teams, but he's not taking anybody to the national championship. They obviously lost to Kalen DeBoer twice last year. Like, Kalen DeBoer has won everywhere he's gone, as Chris brought up a little bit earlier. 12 losses in his head coaching career. Like, he just wins. And so far, he's done that at Alabama. Now, if they do lose tomorrow, I'm interested to see what the conversation about him come Monday is. Like, this guy's not worth anything. We're never going to be the same Alabama again, because it can flip that quickly if this game goes bad tomorrow.
It shouldn't, though.
It shouldn't,
if they
but
got
it
beat
could.
Bad.
Yeah.
I don't think we anticipate that. If you lose a game to Georgia.
If they lost like 38-20, and, it's not close at the end.
Saban lost several games to. How many games did he lose to Gus Malzahn?
Let's see.
There were some.
3?
More than one.
Lose him 3 times? Yeah. I think he did.
Yeah.
Saban's the GOAT. You can't judge a guy but again, when you're at a program like that.
They are waiting. They are waiting for the other shoe to drop on this guy.
That's right. You're right.
But the narratives on this thing are stupid. Like, on the other side, I've already seen people talking about, well, Saban's not there anymore. What does that mean if Kirby still loses to Alabama? Are you freaking kidding me? Like, what does it mean? Nothing. And in the college football playoff world, honestly, this game is fun, but it doesn't end the season for anyone.
We'll make some picks to close out the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Coming up next on your Football Friday here on The Game. Welcome back in Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Westminster, Chris Clark, along with you for a few more minutes on your Football Friday. Reminder, tonight, still going to have the Love Chevrolet High School Football Scoreboard Show with Justin Hall and Elijah Campbell. A little abbreviated one this week because a lot of the games did get moved because of the weather, but that will go on as usual at 7 o'clock tonight. Let's make some picks for this weekend. Looking around the SEC is, again, we don't have to worry about South Carolina playing, and you can take in some of these teams that maybe you haven't gotten a chance to check out just yet. I'll start off with this one, the one where nobody seems to know what they have at quarterback. Oklahoma going to Auburn. Auburn is actually the 1-point favorite in this game.
Wow.
Surprisingly enough, Oklahoma still ranked number 21st in the country, by the way.
Well, but Wes, have you seen Oklahoma's injury list?
Oh, no, I haven't.
Five receivers are out.
It's basically like receiver room out. Like it's like all their guys,
including their leading receiver,
Deion Burks is out. Yeah,
I didn't know that, but is my get in early on South Carolina beating Oklahoma this year gaining some public traction
well,
yet?
you know what some of our friends who lean a little bit more on like they'll get everybody back for South Carolina week, which might be true. I don't know.
They'll have a clean injury report that week of.
They still got to figure out quarterback and
no, but it's the backup quarterback, Wes, who started.
It's not the backup quarterback anymore.
Yeah, we won't be able to say that by the time that.
No,
game
Jackson
rolls
Arnold will come off the bench in that game and have his 400-yard, 8-touchdown game.
Hey, they still got to block Kyle Kennard and Dylan Stewart. So.
Yes, they do. Okay, so Auburn 1-point favorite
according to ESPN Bet. Yes,
I got the Sooners. Still, I don't even care.
Well, yeah, it's all. I mean, Auburn's bad.
Oklahoma has better defense.
Yes, that's what I'm banking on.
I mean,
and the quarterback,
he looked good in the drives that he played last week against Tennessee. And again, they kept that Tennessee high-flying offense, mostly grounded, save for the explosive touchdown. So they didn't torch him for 500 yards.
Tennessee pulled back the reins a little bit, though.
But still, that was a grinded-out game for a good portion of it.
Partially by design, I think.
They didn't run over them.
I think they got smart. I think they knew Oklahoma couldn't hurt them.
Well, you saw Heupel tell Nico after the game, "Hey, I pulled back a little bit. Our defense is playing really well."
Yeah, the only way that game turned would be if Tennessee did something stupid and threw like a pick six. Yes. I feel like so. If you believe, is that some? I saw some people talking some growth from Heupel as a head coach, not just being an offensive guy, being an overall head coach. I don't know. Maybe you're making too much about it. But, yeah, I mean, I'll take Oklahoma. It does kind of feel like one of those Vegas knows. Like, hey, Auburn's not quite as bad as we think they are. But, yeah, I think you got to take Oklahoma regardless.
Take Oklahoma across the board. The other game we're keeping an eye on, Kentucky and Ole Miss. According to this, Ole Miss a 16-point favorite for the noon kick out there in the Grove is, again, the highest quality opponent they've faced up to this point this season.
Give me Ole Miss and Ole Miss to cover.
Tyler, you go before me.
I'll go Ole Miss. I don't think they cover, though. I think like a 14-point win. I think Kentucky's defense makes it interesting, at least.
Was the 2022 game the one that was a 3-point game? Will Levis fumbled at the end or something? It was a 22-19. Yeah, I mean, that was the game, but I think that was the Will Levis game. I've got Ole Miss, but I'm with you, Tyler. Little bit closer.
Now we go to the big game. Georgia, number 2, taking on number 4, Alabama. Again, Alabama is a half-point favorite right now, so essentially pick them, which that line could change between now and then. Georgia going to be without one of their best offensive linemen, and Tate Ratledge, their best run-blocking offensive lineman. That is also missing some guys at receiver like London Humphreys as well. And again, Alabama, a team that does not lose in Bryant-Denny Stadium very often. Can the DeBoer era, in the SEC at least, get off on the right foot?
I got Bama. I think Milroe and the running ability, two obviously outstanding quarterbacks, but I think just how dynamic Milroe is the difference. Forcing Georgia out of maybe some of their base defense type stuff or what they want to do, and maybe that opens things up downfield a little bit. What do you have the over-under in front of you on that, Tyler?
50.5.
Interesting. Yeah, again, Bama.
Yeah, I've got Georgia. I could see that over-under. At first, I was like, it sounds high, but then you actually do the math, and a 27-24 game gets you there, which I can see. So Now, that would be, I mean, as you said, Tyler, Georgia, no touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't look at Georgia and say they haven't been tested. I mean, they have, and they've played Kentucky, they've played Clemson. You know, they've played some folks and haven't given up a touchdown. So now you're saying, all right, they go from giving up no touchdowns to Bama scores multiple touchdowns. So it is possible. I do think it's going to be a little bit touch and go and shaky, but I do have Georgia. I've got Georgia in this game.
You got a score?
Well, I said 27-24. Let's go with that.
27-24.
That sounds good.
I think I think defense is dominating this game. I think that total is a little too high. I'm going to go with Georgia 17 to. What did you think I was going to say, Wes?
I'm saying I said you were picking Georgia.
Well, he had a great breakdown.
You gave me the look.
It wasn't just.
I have my reasons.
Yeah, there you go.
I think 17-14. Maybe it gives even overtime for all we know, but it's going to be
I would love
a fun 4-quarter game for sure. And we'll be able to react to that come Monday and then start turning our attention to Ole Miss coming up next weekend. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Halftime show, myself, Terry Ford, rolling along here Football Friday up next here on the game.